Welcome to the weather forecast on the CIA TV channel. Dear friends, in today's forecast, we'll break down what you need to know about the weather that will affect the United States over the next 7 days. A major change in weather patterns will be taking place in the United States over the next few days, bringing the potential for more severe weather this weekend, including the risk of strong winds, hail, and possibly even a few tornadoes. Additionally, we expect the warm weather pattern to continue with more record-breaking temperatures in the coming days. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday saw some major storms, including one near Springfield, Missouri, that produced winds gusting to 80 miles per hour. In addition, we had a series of scattered showers and thunderstorms across the central and southern plains, also returning to areas like the Ohio Valley. We're expecting widespread storm activity today. The severe weather is not expected to be widespread. It will be isolated, but there will be a line of storms out there throughout the daylight hours, anywhere from the central plains and south back into the Ohio Valley and Midwest, with frequent lightning, strong winds, and maybe even some large hail, and maybe even a brief tornado. This active weather pattern is expected to continue through Tuesday, before a completely new weather pattern emerges midweek. Now let's talk a little more about the weather pattern that will impact the United States in the coming days. In fact, we have a trough currently sitting over the Midwest. This is helping to bring a little colder weather to the Midwest today and tomorrow. On the other hand, we're going to continue to see a bunch of showers and thunderstorms south and east of this low pressure system, so expect at least some isolated severe weather today, which we'll talk more about here in just a moment. We also have high pressure in the Four Corner states, and then a low pressure system just off the coast of California. And we're expecting the monsoon season to start ramping up again in areas like Arizona, so be prepared for that here over the next few days. As we get closer to Wednesday and Thursday, we're expecting the low pressure system to slowly move east, which will increase the chance of rain again in the southwest. And on top of that, we're going to be tracking a shortwave trough that's moving up through the Rocky Mountains and into the northern and central plains. We think we're going to see some severe weather, unfortunately, on July 4th. So on Friday and Saturday, notice how we start to see these little isobars here dropping further south. That also indicates that we're likely to see some troughs. A small shortwave trough is likely to move across the Rocky Mountains on Friday. That's going to bring with it the threat of severe weather, including strong winds, hail, and possibly a tornado threat. And then shortly after that, around Saturday and Sunday, we could see another trough erupt across the Rocky Mountains and move into the northern plains, where there's a chance for more significant severe weather around early next week. That's going to allow for more severe weather events to take place across the northern and central plains, back into the Ohio Valley, and maybe even the Northeast. But I think Friday is where we have a chance for a little bit more of a threat, maybe a little bit more organized severe weather. But that will depend on the wind shear in this area. If we get enough wind shear, we could certainly see a little bit more of a tornado threat. But right now, I think the biggest concern is strong winds and hail from the Midwest back into the Central Plains on July 4th. We could also see some scattered storms back in areas like Florida, and perhaps as far south as Arkansas and Louisiana on July 4th. Severe weather will be a lower threat on Saturday, and then finally on Sunday, another low-pressure system will try to push out of the Rocky Mountains, which could bring more severe weather to areas like the Northern Plains and possibly back into the Midwest. And then next week, we're likely to see an active weather pattern across the southeast and also across the Four Corner states, where the monsoon season is going to ramp up. We could even see a brief tropical storm form back near Florida this weekend into early next week. That's what we're watching. We'll talk more about that here in a second because the National Hurricane Center actually has the potential for Florida to form a tropical storm. And then finally, again, next week, we're going to continue to see at least some severe weather in the northern plains and the Midwest. We think next week this active weather pattern and this extension is going to continue with more severe weather threats coming. And on top of that severe weather threat and heavy rainfall, that could lead to some issues as we get closer to July 4th. It's going to be hot for the next week or two. We're expecting temperatures to be around average. Most areas east of the Rocky Mountains are either slightly below or slightly above average. However, if you go back to the Pacific Northwest or the Rocky Mountains, that's where we're going to be dealing with record-breaking temperatures for the next few days. But by Friday and Saturday, we're going to have a big heat wave across the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and back into Canada as the low-pressure system moves further north. Very warm air is coming out of the south with a high-pressure system still helping to moderate the winds from the south to the north and basically transport tons of moisture and heat. So that's going to continue as we get closer to July 4th. There's definitely going to be above average temperatures across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and across the East Coast on July 4, and eventually into the weekend and early next week. Temperatures are going to be around average or a little above average for most of the country. Things are going to be a little cooler if you go back to the Pacific Northwest. Here are the low temperatures expected for Friday across the United States on our 4th of July. Most areas will be in the low to mid 70s for low temperatures from the Midwest back to the southern plains. You go back to the Pacific Northwest or the Northeast, low temperatures will be in the 50s and low 60s. But high temperatures are a little bit of a different story here. We're expecting most areas across the United States to be in the 80s or 90s for high temperatures. So it's going to be a warm day. If you're in the Midwest, the actual temperatures will be near average. If you go back to West Texas, maybe even a little bit below average. And then back to the Northeast, it's going to be a little bit above average for most of those areas. As we just alluded to, the National Hurricane Center has a low probability of tropical storm formation near Florida over the next 7 days. This is an area where the water temperatures are really warm again in the Northeast Gulf, well above average for this time of year, which is why we could see a tropical storm forming here. If for some reason this is a very stationary storm, if it forms, we could even see a hurricane form. It's just too early to know exactly what's going to happen, but over the next few days we'll be monitoring this, and if there's any major changes, we'll certainly let you know in a forecast format. But we're definitely watching for something. Also, Tropical Storm Barry is no longer a tropical storm. It made landfall in Mexico last night and is no longer really a threat, at least to the United States. It was never really a threat, but South Texas did at least get some rain from this disturbance. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the severe weather potential over the next few days, starting today. And we have a small threat of severe weather from the Texas Panhandle all the way down into Michigan and Pennsylvania. Overall, the biggest concerns are going to be isolated damaging winds and isolated large hail. We wouldn't rule out a very isolated, very brief tornado in the Ohio Valley today, but overall the threat for tornadoes is very low to zero today. And then as we get into Tuesday, the severe weather threat will shift further east, where we have a small risk of severe weather in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, also back into northern Virginia. And the small threat extends from Maine all the way down into South Carolina. The main danger on Tuesday will be damaging winds. There could also be some large hail along with some of the storms. Not really expecting anything over 60 to 70 miles per hour winds or even anything larger than ping pong ball hail size from this event. Wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado, but generally anything that does happen in the tornado fashion would be very brief. Not a huge concern, but definitely keep an eye on the weather on Tuesday because we're again expecting scattered storms across this region. So that's where severe weather is headed for over the next couple of days. Starting today, we're expecting scattered storms across the Ohio Valley today, mostly across Ohio and western Pennsylvania, with isolated damaging winds, large hail, possibly a brief tornado. Then tonight, we're actually expecting a line of storms to form back into Missouri all the way down to Oklahoma. We could even see a small area of concentrated storms moving through areas like St. Louis tonight. With the fact that we don't expect anything widespread here, and most of these storms will be outflow dominated. So the actual tornado threat is very minimal. But again, a lot of storms are going to be rolling in today. If you have any outdoor plans, make sure you keep an eye on the weather. There are ways to get warnings if the thunder is rumbling indoors at night. These storms will continue to move through the Mississippi River Valley and will slowly move toward Alabama early Tuesday morning. And again, no, there is no actual severe weather forecast after midnight tonight. This will be a very isolated threat. And as we head into Tuesday, more storms are expected across the Ohio Valley, mostly east of the Mississippi River, back into the eastern Kentucky, and back into eastern Tennessee as well. There could be strong winds and isolated hail from those storms, and lightning, including cloud-to-ground lightning, will be a possibility again on Tuesday. We think Wednesday will be much drier here across the Ohio Valley. Back into the southern plains, we expect at least some storms to develop later this afternoon, mostly around 7 in southern and central Oklahoma, back into northern Texas and also into the Narrows, where strong winds and potentially damaging hail. The tornado threat is essentially zero in that area, and on Tuesday, a few more storms are possible from Dallas all the way into western Texas. Nothing but strong winds or isolated hail is possible on Tuesday. And here's the timing for the East Coast on Tuesday. Around 2 o'clock is when a lot of storms will be popping up across eastern Kentucky, Tennessee, and some surprise storms in Virginia and northern West Virginia. High winds will be the biggest concern out of all of these storms. I expect a bunch of different clusters to form, which means the threat of strong winds will be the main concern here. Not going to rely on an individual tornado, but I think that threat is very low. There could also be scattered hail, nothing larger than $quarter to $half sized hail really. What I am expecting by 6 o'clock on Tuesday is for the storms to move into eastern Maryland, also getting close to Delaware. Then by 8 to 9 p.m. tomorrow night, most of the storms will have dissipated, but isolated damaging winds are still possible anywhere from western Massachusetts all the way up to northern Alabama. We will continuously update the storm situation in the next news. Please subscribe to the channel to follow. Thank you for watching the news on CIA TV channel.